The FBI wants to put informants in churches. This might be a lot for people to handle, but it's the truth. The FBI hates people that give their life to something higher. Also in the news, we have MSNBC blaming Kevin McCarthy for inflation, and the Pentagon finally learning its lesson after the second leak happened within the same exact week. All of this and more on this episode of The Demetrius Ruvajo Show.
Facts over tracks, this and that, spitting slow, spitting fast, I could roast, I could gas, think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past.
Okay, moving on to the next article, we actually have a Daily Wire article. We have Going Green, the physical, mental, and emotional problems associated with marijuana. In an era when the left obsessively fights against misinformation, at least one subject has evaded their concern. Although scientific studies indicate that marijuana is associated with profound mental illness, emotional problems, and physical diseases, a shocking number of Americans believe that weed is harmless or helpful, possibly even a natural cure for cancer. The media frequently parrot these talking points of billionaires George Soros, Peter Lewis, and John Sperling, who spent an estimated of $71.3 million between 1996 and 2016 to promote drug legalization. In the process between creating an image of marijuana as a benign natural remedy, websites like Vox.com promote the narrative, telling readers, quote, overall, marijuana is a relatively safe drug. Marijuana's harms appear to be a relatively small. Media malpractice has led to a new pandemic of Americans ingesting increasingly high-potency marijuana, unaware of the consequences. After a prosperous fall during the Just Say No era of the 1980s, marijuana use has been rising, especially amongst America's young people. In 1992, the number of children between the ages of 12 to 17 who had used marijuana in the last month stood at 4% in 2019. That rate more than doubled to 9%, according to the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. A large part has been the push for drug legalization and decriminalization begun that year by George Soros after Colorado legalized for recreational marijuana in 2014. The number of total users increased by nearly 2/3. Marijuana's positive PR has proven particularly successful among the most desperate and vulnerable Americans. Almost 1 in 4 breast cancer victims smokes marijuana, and 49% of cannabis users believe that medical cannabis could be used to treat cancer itself. According to a new study published by the American Cancer Society, a separate study found that 80% of high-impact articles on social media were false news that proposed cannabis as cancer cure. That should be concerning for a panoply of reasons, since numerous studies have showed that marijuana use can harm people in at least the following ways: psychosis, and schizophrenia. Several studies have found that smoking marijuana can trigger mental illness, including psychosis like schizophrenia, especially in people already pre-diagnosed to develop them. Cannabis use, primarily THC in cannabis, is genuinely predisposed or at-risk populations led to earlier diagnosis of psychosis or schizophrenia. Found a systematic review of existing research conducted by Squidopedal and colleagues and published at the peer-reviewed Services Journal of Medical Science. THC in cannabis also makes schizophrenia and psychosis symptoms worse and causes more relapses and hospitalizations. There was one of the numerous studies linking mental illness to marijuana consumption. 10 studies have found a significant risk of young cannabis users developing psychosis, reported the Scientific American in 2017. Cannabis use during puberty is a major risk factor for schizophrenia, said Hannelore Richrick of the Max Planck Institute of Experimental Medicine at the 2017 World Psychiatric Association's World Congress. Robin Murray, a professor of the psychiatry at King's College in London, found that nearly 1 out of 4 cases of schizophrenia he researched involved the use of high-potency marijuana. There is a strong association of cannabis use with the onset of psychiatric disorders. The American Psychiatric Association summarized in 2019. Anxiety and other psychological issues. Ironically, although many people use marijuana to reduce anxiety, it may make the problem worse. A 2017 study found, in the words of Psychology Today, the smoking marijuana increased feelings of paranoia and anxiety, visual illustrations, strangeness and inattention, and slowed time, as well as poor performance on tasks related to memory and response inhibition. Among people at high clinical risk of psychiatric disorders, the culprit is THC, which appears to decrease anxiety at lower doses and increase anxiety at higher doses. According to the University of Washington's Alcohol and Drug Abuse Institute, the potential for harm has increased as the mean THC concentration of marijuana nearly doubled between 2008 and 2017. Shorter life expectancy. Men who have used marijuana heavily in their teen years are 40% more likely to die by the time that they've reached age 60, according to the massive study published in the American Journal of Psychiatry. Swedish researchers analyzed the records of more than 45,000 men beginning in 1969 and 1970, reported CBS News. The scientists from the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm reported that 4,000 people have died during the 42-year follow-up period, and men who'd used marijuana heavily at the ages of 18 and 19 were 40% more likely to die at the age of 60 compared to guys who haven't used the drug. Their findings upended previous studies that found no such linkage. Becoming poorer and more relationship problems. Regular marijuana users end up in a lower class than their parents, with lower paying, less skilled, and less prosperous jobs. They also experience more financial problems, more problems at work, and more relationship difficulties. According to a study that followed 1,000 regular marijuana users from the age of 18 to 38, individuals who have reported regular cannabis use and persistent dependence experience downward socioeconomic mobility, more financial difficulties, workplace problems, and relationship conflict in early midlife. According to the Magdalena Cerrito of the University of California Davis Health System and Ashram Kaspi and Terry Moffat at Duke University, whose study appeared in Clinical Psychological Research, the peer-reviewed journal of the Association of Psychological Science. Memory problems and brain aging. Regular marijuana users had a hard time remembering new information, according to a team of researchers who studied nearly 3,400 American marijuana users over a 25-year period. Marijuana usage can reduce decision-making ability, memory, and physical control in the short term, and some negative effects that may persist for life. Harvard Medical School explained that there is no question that marijuana can produce short-term problems with thinking, working memory, executive function, and psychomotor function. Physical actions that require conscious thought, such as driving a car or making a musical or playing a musical instrument. This is because marijuana's main psychoactive chemical, THC, causes its effect by attaching to receptors in the brain's regions that are vital for memory formation, including the hippocampus, amygdala, and central cerebral cortex. While the full effect of the long-term use is unknown, a 2016 UC San Francisco study found that even in past use of marijuana made people less likely to remember words in adulthood. After examining 62,454 brain scans, researchers found that cannabis abuse accelerated brain aging by 2.8 years, a contributing factor to developing Alzheimer's disease, according to a study published in the peer-reviewed Journal of Alzheimer's Disease. Prior papers have suggested that marijuana can damage the brain. What surprised us was how low blood flow was to the brains of our cohort. Virtually every brain area had reduced blood flow on perfusion imaging in relation to marijuana use, said Dr. Cyprus Rajay, who co-authored the study. Lung diseases like asthma and bronchitis. Marijuana smoking is associated with a high airway inflammation, increased airway resistance, according to a thesis of scholarly research produced by the United States government's National Institute on Drug Abuse. And those who smoke marijuana regularly report more symptoms of chronic bronchitis than those who do not smoke. NIDA also cited studies showing that marijuana may suppress the body's immune system, increasing the chances of developing paranoia and chronic bronchitis, testicular cancer. Several studies have found a positive correlation between marijuana use in the development of testicular cancer, especially among heavy users who had smoked pot at least 50 times in their lives. One review scholarly literature cautions the existing evidence is low strength because so many marijuana users also smoke cigarettes, but they still find weed inhalation increases that the likelihood of developing testicular gum cell tumors, TGCT, possibly lowers intelligence. Some evidence indicates that marijuana use decreases the intelligence of people who take it. The most consequential study comes from New Zealand, the Dunedin study, where researchers found marijuana users from age 18 to 38 and found that people who begin using marijuana in adolescence lost between 6 to 8 points from their IQ, and quitting does not reverse the intelligence loss. Future studies disputed this somewhat, as researchers discovered cannabis users already had significant lower IQ scores, but another way cannabis did not drag down their IQ, it was already low. To put that nicely, researchers are now pursuing the chicken and egg question of whether adolescent marijuana use makes people stupid, or if stupid people choose to use marijuana, which is actually really funny. Because if you're already smart, you have it all, why would you actually go out and pursue marijuana when your life is great and you have money, you're smart? Why would you go and pursue marijuana at that point? It doesn't make much sense. Inability to feel joy. Researchers warned about higher THC levels causing cannabis-induced anoia, a medical term which means the inability to feel pleasure in Greek. Over years, the regular use of cannabis has subsequently increased among young adults, as indicated by the rise of cannabis use disorder, CUD, with an estimated prevalence of 8.3% in the United States, said a March 2001 study in the peer-reviewed journal Frontiers in Psychology. Researchers showed that exposure to cannabis is associated with hypodermologic anemia, depression, cognitive decline, poor memory, inattention, impaired learning performance, reduced dopamine brain response associated emotion ability, and increased addiction severity in young adults. On the other hand, researchers in Canada found a marked increase in emergency department consultations of cannabis-related mood disorders, as well as a suicide and an international self-harm. After the notion legalized recreational marijuana in October 2018, this may stem from marijuana's addictive components altering the person's approach to the brain's reward circuitry after a flood of dopamine, creating false memories. Any media interested in combating misinformation would condemn the rising rate of marijuana use, since cannabis seems to increase false memory prognosis, according to a March 2020 study from the Netherlands. Innocent bystanders. Although drug use is often presented as a personal decision, the harm caused by marijuana extends beyond the user alone. Aside from the toll of innocent lives when marijuana users drive under the influence, the American Lung Association warned secondhand marijuana smoke contains many of the same toxins and carcinogens found in directly inhaled marijuana smoke in similar amounts, if not more. Their biggest concern is about vulnerable children in the home. Contrary to MSNBC and CNN hand-wingers, the real disinformation comes from paid propagandists, scientists on the take, and billionaires who, for whatever reason, are promoting a drug that appears to inhibit Americans from exercising the cognitive functions necessary to be independent citizens. The effort to whitewash drug abuse is typical in a world that demands pressure with no consequences, but that world does not exist. A fact too many people find out too late, and I completely agree. See, and there's a lot of side effects that people just don't think of when you first start that drug. You don't think of other people because you're self-centered. People don't think of other people. People don't think of their family. People don't think of the people that they may kill reckless driving when they're high as hell driving the car. No, they don't realize any of this because they don't care. Now, with that being said, let's move on to the headlines of the week. Now, moving on to the next article, moving on to the first article, we have the Federalist. Tim Kaine, it's okay for the FBI to put informants in churches. Virginia Democrat Senator Tim Kaine gave the FBI his approval to investigate Catholic parishioners in his own state on Monday. When asked by a local ABC affiliate about the FBI's Richmond division infiltrating Catholic communities to spy on the church for alleged extremism, Kaine called the revelations a misunderstanding. I think the key is communication, Kaine told ABC 13. If the FBI has a concern like that, then go to the church leaders and say, hey, look, we have a concern and we don't want your members to get unwittingly caught up in something. Former FBI Special Agent Kyle Seraphin blew the whistle on the agency's Richmond office investigating the Catholic Church with undercover informants in February. Okay, so this needs to stop right now. First of all, people are going to church because they want to talk to God, they want to pray, they want to have something in their life that is higher than them, and they want to have a much more fulfilling life. They're not going over there because they want to see, I don't know, ads for Trump and they want to see ads for Biden. They're not going to get into radical extremists going to church. That doesn't make any sense. What, you're going to talk about and thwart how you're going to raid the Capitol like at church? No, you're not. You're going to just sit there and say how the Bible is teaching you the lessons that you need for a successful and fulfilling life. You're going to sit there and pray. You're going to sit there and sing with your peers. You're going to sit there and light the candle at the beginning of the church. What do you think happens in church? See, these people don't even know what the hell they're talking about. Not the Federalists, but the people that are within the FBI. They want to sit in church because they don't want to act like they actually want to go to church. So they want to attend the church and pretend as though they're undercover, when in actuality, they just want to go to church because they know that it will give them a much more fulfilling life. That's the conspiracy theory. The FBI, Seraphin wrote, would like to protect Virginians from the threat of white supremacy, which it believes has found aid at a home within Catholics who prefer the Latin Mass. So what? So you think that you're going to find white supremacy at a Latin Mass for Catholic? Now, you need to talk about something that's more far-fetched than this, because I think that that thing that's more far-fetched does not exist. The documents assesses with high confidence the FBI can mitigate the threat of radical traditionalistic Catholics by recruiting sources within the Catholic Church, Seraphin warned. House Republicans on the Judiciary Committee responded to the news with a subpoena to the FBI Director Christopher Wray earlier this month. We know the FBI, relying on information retrieved from at least one undercover employee, sought to use local religious organizations as new avenues for a tripwire in source development. Committee Chairman Jim Jordan of Ohio wrote in a subpoena cover letter. Kaine said Monday that the FBI has been running similar surveillance of American Muslims. We've done the same thing for years, working in tandem with mosquitoes because they have been groups that have been targeted or radicalized, especially among young people, the senator said. Despite the FBI's targeting of Catholics, United States bishops remain silent. The United States Catholic Conference of Bishops is a powerful organization with a United States 2018 budget of more than $200 million. Much of it is from federal grants and contracts. The Federalist Evita Duffy Alfresco reported in February, what has the Catholic Church Heritiary had to say in the 7 days since the slanderous leak? Nothing. The conference has never responded to the Federalist inquiries. Bishop Barry Chestnut was the only United States bishop to speak out on the issue 1 week after the February whistleblower report. No, this should not happen at all. This is my take. This should not happen. If it happens, and we need to make sure that they know that we will never accept this in our churches, because that's a complete slap in the face. That's a complete slap in the face. We need to know, and the FBI needs to know, that we the people would not ever support this at all. Now moving on to the next article, we actually have the Federalist. Surgeon castrating gender diverse urchiness manifests the evil of transgenderism. The idea of urnish as a gender identity that needs to be affirmed with surgical castration is obviously insane. Never trust somebody who wants to cut off your balls for fun and profit. This advice should not be necessary, but a plastic surgeon who specializes in transgender surgeries has just provided another valuable, if advantageous example of the rule. And another lesson is how gender ideology has corrupted medicine. Shabab Galea, a Miami surgeon who aggressively uses social media to promote the hundreds of gender-affirming surgeries she does every year, some on children, recently posted a video about castrating men who identify as Archons. As she explains, Archons are just another group of gender-diverse individuals, albeit one that hasn't been very visible. Perhaps Galea is looking for a new revenue stream after Florida Republicans led by Governor Ron DeSantis protected children from surgical transition. Or maybe she's just carving healthy people up. In her social media posts, she always seems to be very excited about amputating adolescent girls' breasts. Maybe it's both. Whether her motives, her decision of Orange as a so-called gender identity reveals the rottenness of the supposed medical consciousness on transgenderism. After all, she didn't make this whole Orange thing up. As she points out, there is an entire chapter devoted to these folks in the most recent vision of the WPATH SOC. That is the standards of care put out by the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. WPATH is an activist organization, but it is nonetheless treated as the arbiter of medical care of these issues by both the corporate media and the major medical groups, such as the American Medical Association. Galea's video is a vivid demonstration that these supposed medical experts are quacks. The idea of enrich as a gender identity that needs to be affirmed with surgical castration is obviously insane, but it is, on inspection, even worse than this. Not only did WPATH add Ernst as a new type of gender identity in need of surgical mutilation, but it did so in collaboration with people who literally fantasize about raping and castrating children, and the rest of medical consensus is just fine with this. Evil incarnate. As Redox reported when the draft guidelines were released, the section on Ernst refers extensively to research collected from a hardcore fetish site called Ernst Archives, a site that features child sexual exploitation fantasies centered around stopping little boys from going through puberty. Many of the men with an interest in Ernst identity seek it not just for themselves, but are aroused at others, including children being castrated. As Redox discovered in examining this website, many of the site's stories focus on the eroticization of child castration. Children may be forcibly castrated under extreme duress. Some narratives contain violent sexualized depictions of children with stunned puberty being raped by doctors, written in sickening detail. Within the protected fiction archives, there were over 3,000 stories involving minors, including the explicit sexual abuse of children, and minors was a specifically curated tag that users could select to easily access stories specifically featuring children. The fictional pornography includes themes such as Nazi doctors castrating children, baby boys being fed milk with estrogen in order to be violently sex trafficked as adolescents, and pedophilic fantasies of children who have been castrated to halt their puberty, freezing them in a childlike state. Redox also learned that